Good morning or good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're watching from. Welcome to our live event today. Sorry, a little frog there going on. We are going to work on a project today called Diamond Sparkle. Little bit of an inspiration. Maybe it's a little after the Olympics now, but this was something that kind of inspired me as I was looking through fabrics. And I thought, well, patriotic fabrics would work, but you could use just about anything to make this 6-pointed star. And we're going to use strips. So it's really friendly to leftover pieces. Those may be coming from a pre-cut set of strips that you already have used. Some of them, but not all of them. We just need a few to make this table topper. So I'm Colleen Tauke, and I'm your instructor today for this live event. And Diamond Sparkle is the pattern that you're going to want to download. And a QR code will probably pop up here shortly, or in the comments, you'll see the link to the pattern. So you can go and download it. If you haven't done that already, you can take some notes now and go back and download it after we're completed the video. Excuse me. We are going to be working with 3 prints and a background fabric. Now, when it comes to picking out the fabrics for this, you're going to want to use, excuse me, a little bit smaller scale prints so that you can actually see the design within the strips. We're not going to be cutting large pieces, so 2.5 inch. You'll want to look at the scale of that print to decide, will it read well in our patchwork? So by looking at just a 2.5 inch strip of the fabric to preview it, you would be able to see enough of the design in these that allow it to still read well within the project and kind of hold together in its design. This is a red with just a little bit of white to it. So that reads really nice and strong as a red. And the others have the red within them, so they make really a nice complement to the coordination of those 3. Now, when you go ahead and pick out those fabrics for your strip sets that we're going to be cutting later, you'll want something as a background. Background is that place where the eye rests. The design within holds together nicely and pops, and the background fabric doesn't distract from the design. So here I just picked a simple white on white. You could use a solid, some kind of a tonal, makes a really nice background fabric so that all of the fun coordinating prints and the patchwork that you do really pops out nicely within the project. Now, when it comes to how we're going to put all this together, there are some really good tricks that we can use, because a lot of times we look at something like this and go, those are set in seams. No, I don't want to do that. I have a lot of seams coming together in the center. Yes, I think that's great, but I'm not going to attempt to do that myself. So there are some tricks that will make that come together nicely, and you'll have a good experience putting the diamond sparkle together. So hang with me. We're going to use one specialty ruler, and then we're going to use a ruler that you have already in your supplies in your studio, and you may not have used it that way to cut some diamonds also. So hang on. It's going to be fun. Let's put this back here and talk about getting started with our pattern here. Oh, remember to jump in and tell us where you're watching from. And have you ever made a 6-pointed star like this before? And did you have success, or were there some tripping spots along the way? I know a lot of us have tried things and then thought later, what was I thinking? But we're trying to make those experiences more pleasant, more successful. And by using some of our tricks and tips today, you'll have that success. Excuse the frog I have today. Okay, we are going to be using 2.5 inch strips, which will make you think about those pre-cuts. And that's how we're going to cut our triangles to put together the diamond shapes within this. So this is an easy sewing thing to do, strip sets. A lot of us have purchased those pre-cut 2.5-inch strips and have done some patchwork with those, but maybe you haven't tried using, and I'm going to use a 60-degree diamond ruler, and there are many on the market out there, but make sure that it's a 60-degree triangle, not diamond, triangle, 60-degree. There are others out there that are 45-degree. There are others that are a variation, but very close to this. Make sure that it is labeled as a 60-degree or a pyramid ruler, okay? Because otherwise we're going to have a real hard time putting it together, because if we think about the degrees in a circle, we have 6 pieces, and 6 times 60 is the 360. We needed to make an entire circle. So make sure that it's a 60-degree pyramid or triangle ruler. The ones out there that are Tri-Rex, not 60-degree, okay? Make sure it's a 60-degree triangle. Now, because of using that, we are going to be able to make those wonderful diamonds within it, and it's not nearly as hard as making those diamonds. So let's get to the piecing portion. Now, one thing that I want you to remember when you're working with strip sets is to do things in pairs. So you can see I've already put my third piece on here. I joined together my first 2 fabrics, and I did the pressing. That seam allowance is already pressed in one direction. So I didn't seam everything together and then try to go back and press. Remember to be patient, do 2 at a time. Make sure you take that break to go to the iron and the pressing surface and press your seam allowance in one direction. Then join your third. It's very hard to maneuver the iron when there are 2 seams in there, and you will have less success when it comes to pressing if you try to join a bunch of seams together and then make that trip to the ironing board. I know it's tempting, because a lot of us think, well, if I do all the seaming, then maybe I can get up from the iron or the sewing machine fewer times. But that's not quite how we need it to go. We need you to go back and forth. Also, remember, it's always really good to get up from the sewing machine from time to time, so that you get that blood moving, because that oxygen also works your brain. So we've added our third piece. I know it's tempting to take it to the iron and press the long direction, because this is a long seam. It seems like I just want to go in and barrel down that seam. But remember, I've taught you in the past to put the seam going out away from you, and you will have better success of making that press nice and straight. We say good morning from, let's say Lisa says good morning from a cold Wisconsin. It's cold in Iowa too. We had 7 inches in our last snowstorm. So we also have Denise saying welcome, and she's from sunny, warm Johannesburg. We are glad that you're watching. Let's see, who else do I have? Sandy says hello. Greetings from Austria. And Bridget says hello and watching from Belgium. So we are glad that you're watching. And we got one more. We have Cat Lady in the United Kingdom. And Jenny says good morning and good afternoon, good evening here in Texas. We are glad that you're joining us today. Now, when we go to do that third, or put that third piece on and do our pressing, real quick demo, we're going to press all our seam allowances in one direction. Later, we're going to do a little bit of a corrective press so we can get opposing seams. But at this point in the process, we're just going to press our seams all in one direction. Now, I tend to finger press. I don't know about you, but I want to make sure I get that seam open all the way to the stitching line. So I go in and I finger press just lightly. Then I come in with my iron. Remember, this is a pressing, not an iron. So we're just dropping the weight of the iron. I know people will ask sometimes, so what iron should I buy? You should buy the iron that's the heaviest that you can deal with, because the weight of the iron is doing the work. The press down is what will flatten the seam and make a nice crisp press on your fabric. So make sure that you go in and drop that iron on there to make that nice and crisp line. Now, if you're working with yardage and you're cutting your own strips, and later we're going to be cutting some bias edges. Remember, spray start your best press. Maybe your buddy, if you have any fear of distorting cut edges. Now, if you're working with pre-cut strips, it's kind of a do I or don't I, because it's hard to know how those pre-cut strips will react to spray starch or a sizing being added to it. It may distort your strips. So at that point, you may just have to use the pre-cuts as is. But if you're cutting your own yardage like I was, it was a good thing to go in and add a little bit of best press onto the fabric, just so I don't get that distortion later. And I can handle my pieces a bit without having that bias edge be my enemy. So we have, let's see, I got to see names here quick. Diane, new joiner from Kentucky. Welcome. We're glad you're here. And let's see, there's more over here. Anya says good morning from Minnesota. Joan says good morning from Pierce, South Dakota. Joe says hello from Mitchell, South Dakota. I've been through Mitchell, South Dakota before. And let's see, we have a hello from Fairview Heights, Illinois. We are glad that you're joining us. Once you get your strip sets made, you're only going to make 2 of the strip sets so that you can get all the pieces that you need off for your project. And depending on the width of your fabric, I don't think you can make it out of just one, because there's always the selvage edge. Every fabric is just a little bit different in width. They never come out perfectly even. So I have one already prepared here, and I've taken pieces off that end, but I want to talk about how to get started doing the cutting. So we are bringing in our 60-degree ruler so that we can cut right along those diagonals. And we're going to use the entire width of this. This is made to cut off of a strip. You will find that that triangle, this one in particular, I don't know if it's still made out there, but there are 60-degree, like I said, there's I think I counted at least 5 different companies that make 60-degree rulers like this for a triangle. And some are made with a blunted top, which makes it very easy to go off of a strip to line it up. So we're going to use the entire 6.5-inch width. The instructions will tell you that it needs to be, and it's also a double check on your strip set if it comes out the right size. So we're going to put the bottom of our ruler at the bottom of our strip set. And we are going to cut up both sides. So we've got 1 and 2. Now, when you cut like that, you'll notice that this, with the small red, is going to be one of the pieces in the center. But what about the pieces? So we've got this piece right here. It's going toward the center, but we need its companion to make a diamond. And its companion is simply taking the 60-degree triangle and placing it the other direction on the strip set. So now my ruler alongside the bottom of my triangle, if I'm using the printing on that, the bottom is going to be at the top of my strip set, so that I cut up, and I've lined up the left-hand side with my previous cut. So now I only have to cut one side, and now I have the other half of my diamond. There we go. So we need to cut 6 matching pieces like this. So you'll work your way down your strip set. If at any time when you're working down a strip set and you lay it on the strip set and this edge, this previous cut edge, it will get wonky. I guarantee it every time it will happen. It gets off just a little bit. That's okay. You can overcut your piece and then go back and recut the left-hand side. So I'm going to cut like this, and then I'm going to go back and I'm going to clean up cut this side. I don't know the exact term for it other than it gets wonky. It happens to everyone. It happens even when you're cutting off just units off of a strip set. Maybe you're making 4 patches or 9 patches and you're cutting off units. It will get just a little bit off. Don't worry, you've done nothing wrong. You are in the majority of us quilters. Just make a cleanup cut so that you have nice, accurate pieces. Elaine says, good morning. Barbara says, good morning from Canada. And Cindy says, hello from New Jersey. First time here. We are glad that you're joining in on with all the fun. And hello, Kelly from Arizona. And let's see. I think I've got everybody right now. Okay, I'm going to cut a couple more pieces so that we can do a layout of how this is all going together. And we do need to cut our background pieces. So if you are very, very confident, you could maybe do 2 layers at once. But remember that if you stack your pieces and you make a miscut, you multiply it. So a lot of us will really stick with, and this piece is off just a little tiny bit. See, clean up cut, just take that little bit off. It keeps me honest, and that way I know my pieces will lay together nicely. When I was working on this, I was trying to figure out in my head, do I want to cut multiple layers? Well, you know, sometimes it's best to be safe and just cut 1 layer at a time. Since we're working on a table topper and we're only making 1 star, my suggestion is stick with the 1 layer. It keeps you from making a multiplied error. If you are very, very confident in your cutting skills, you could cut through more than 1 layer at a time, but you make that call. I know I've thought about things before and thought, I could do that. But if I make a mistake, I'm multiplying it as I go. And that's never fun. It's not fun to make errors like that. So I would say err on the side of caution so that you work your way back and forth down the strip set until you get all of the pieces you need. And then we're going to cut using the same ruler some of our background triangles, and then we're going to cut some diamonds. So from our background fabric, you can see there's my blunt edge on this one. So I've cut pieces for the surround. And if you looked ahead in the pattern, you'll see that you need 4, I got to remember my numbers too, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, yep, 4 of the triangles, but you need 4 diamonds as well. And I will show you really quick how to cut those. Got a long piece here. Now, if you happen to be like me and you have a collection of just about every ruler on the planet, and you happen to have a 60-degree diamond ruler, okay, you may use that. Make sure it's a 60-degree diamond, not the skinny 45-degree diamond, but a 60-degree diamond. But you don't need this fancy ruler. You can use an 8 by 14. You can use an 8.5 by 24. All of your rulers have degree angles on them. So all you really need is a ruler with a 60-degree angle. Did you know that you had the capability to cut diamonds right there in your workspace already? So we are going to lay this out. Now, cutting 6.5 wide strip, okay? Remember, our triangles were cut 6.5 high. So that 6.5 is the number you need to keep in your head in order to cut diamond shapes off of a strip. And I'll do it from the end that hasn't cut yet so we can show you everything we need to do. We need to find the 60-degree angle on your ruler, and I marked it with some tape. You don't want to make the tape go right on the line. You want to be able to see the line. So mark it so that your eye can fall there. And you're going to take your strip of fabric. Now I have to think about where I'm placing it. Okay. I'm going to put that 60-degree line on my fabric. And I need to make sure that it's extra long so that I can cut the very first angle, or we could work from the other direction. 60 degree this way. You could put the line along the bottom. Maybe this is the best. Along the bottom, so we get the beginning piece, we get that selvage out of the way, and we make sure that our strip is long enough, okay? So I've got my 60 degree line on the bottom of my strip set, or my strip. I'm going to cut that edge. So that's one edge of my diamond. So there's the beginning of my diamond. This is a good place to use that best press or spray starch so that you know that you won't get distortion, because that's a bias edge. And we want to be very gentle, but I've pressed this so we can take just a little bit of handling. Now, instead of using the 60 degree, remember we talked about 6.5 inch. So I need to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.5 inches. And I'm going to line that up with the edge I just cut. And right on top of that cut, I can slice here. And voila, I have a 60 degree diamond, perfectly cut. So since we have that one edge already fairly accurate, if it happens to get wonky, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.5, I can get one more off this strip. So I've put it at the 6.5. If you want to double check yourself, you can use that 60 degree line on the bottom of your strip, sliding it so that you're kind of wedging it in between the 60 degree line and the 6.5 inch line there, and cut again. So there's many ways to cut fabric. So now we have 2 of the diamonds that we need. We'll need 4 in total, but let's look at the layout so we can talk about how this all goes together. Let's see. Barbara says, hello from North Carolina. I have, let's see. Hello from Norway. Yay. Martha says, hello from Texas. And let's see. Jeannie says, good morning from Connecticut. They're popping in from everywhere. Judy says, hello from Lancaster, UK. Judy, I'm so glad to see your name pop up. Diane says, good morning from Mesa, Arizona. Susan is from snowy Maine. I bet you're hoping for spring soon. So am I. And Susan said, could be used as a Star of David for Hanukkah. That's true. It could. Very good. Esther says, hello, everyone from the Netherlands. So now that we have our pieces cut, it's time for that diagram on page 3. Now, the diamonds the triangles are not striped. They're just plopped in so that we talk about orientation and getting those together. But if you notice, there is row 1, 2, 3, 4. We're going to put this together in rows. What quilter doesn't like to put things together in rows? It simplifies the process and makes for a very easy process. So what we're going to do, and what I was doing while I was putting mine together, is to lay it out and keep going back to that layout so you keep everything oriented properly. Sherry says, hello from Arkansas. Tanya from Pennsylvania. Let's see if I've got someone else here. Joan from Colorado. Melanie from Buffalo, New York. Josephine from Connecticut. And, oh, it just jumped on me. Carol from Missouri. Another first timer. We are so glad that you're joining us. Mary says, hello from Florida. So if you enjoy our videos, let your friends know. Let your quilt friends know. We love it to come together as a quilt community and share techniques and ideas so that we all stay energized and full of great projects. I know even myself, sometimes we kind of get in a lull in our creativity, and it's nice to see a demo, especially in the weather right now. It's not easy to get out to go to a quilt show. I envy those who were at QuiltCon, those who can get out and get to those places, but not everybody can travel right now because the weather is just winter. It's reared its ugly head and it's back. It's causing colds and funny sounding voices. And it's nice to see ideas out there and get inspiration from fellow quilters. So we have portions. I don't have quite enough. I need to cut another couple of triangles so that I can demo how we're going to tackle this to put our rows together, making sure I don't nick into my project underneath there. I need one more center. Thought I had enough. Close. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We need a couple more. Now, how many of you have tackled a project like this before and had the center become distorted and said, never again, I'm not making a star with that many seams coming together in the middle. I know that it can be frustrating. And when you pick up some tips on how to put things together where you can match up seams, make sure I'm not getting into the direction underneath there. There we go. That's probably enough, at least to get us around the wheel here as we put this out. Want to get, there we go. Now we have everything we need. Okay, so we're matching up those pieces that look like diamonds now. 2 triangles that are going to make diamonds. But we're not going to stitch them per se into diamonds right away. This is our last piece that will go up here that it's a little hard for you to all catch on the camera, but we are going to be following this diagram. So the black triangles around the outside are actually our setting pieces. So we have 2 triangles that come together down here, a triangle here, and a triangle here. And if you think about the way you place them, remember that little blunted tip on mine means that that's the straight of grain. That means that the outer edge will have straight of grain too. And if I can put those bias edges towards the center, it will be a little easier as I layer this to quilt it so that I don't have that stretch and distortion on the outside edge. So if you can kind of think of that while you're laying out your triangles, sometimes it's hard to remember, oh, where's the straight of grain? But if you put it under a bright light, you can see the weave of the fabric. And we're going to have triangles up in the top corner too, but they're on opposite sides, okay? Then we're taking our diamonds and we're going to have some bias edges. It's not the end of the world. We're going to have some bias edges, but as few as possible is nice. So you see this diamond will fill this space and this diamond will fill this space here. Now, when I went to put it together, I was like, you all will shoot me if I have set-in seams because I don't like doing set-in seams. I can do them, but they're not fun. So let's put this together in rows. Okay? Everything in the quilt world, if it can be done in rows, we are all much happier. So what we're going to do is we're going to put together, and this is the same on the opposite side. So mirror image, you got 2 basic rows you're going to be making, but a mirror image. You're going to be putting together a pieced triangle like this and 2 diamonds. In this case, right sides together. They're going to be offset just a little. It's okay to have that triangle stick out the end. It should on both ends, okay? And it should be centered evenly and seam this together. I'm going to do that one real quick so that we get, and you can only do one at a time because you have to press before, whoops, right sides together. Even the designer has to think about right sides together. Okay, making sure that print is right sides together. Make sure my little triangle's sticking out the end there. Okay. So that once we get these pieces on these outside rows, this is the easiest part. Just putting those diamonds on each side of the triangle. A little bit more trick to the very center portion, but still not hard to do. We're going to press our seam allowance toward the background fabric, the direction of least resistance, because you have all of those crossed seams on the back side. So we want to press that toward the background fabric, and you're going to do the same with the second diamond. Once you get that on, you're going to press seam allowances out. Now, let's tackle this more complex row on the inside. Now, we pressed all our seam allowances in one direction when we were doing our strip set, correct? So that means there are a couple of places we want to do some corrective pressing. Yes, it's a thing. Corrective pressing was something we want because we want opposing seams so we can match things up, because our eye is going to really see those intersections on our project. We want these intersections to be nice and clean. We want to see that hexagon shape when we're done. We don't want a big jump in the color, okay? So I'm going to take 2 of them and press them in opposite directions, and actually the third. So we're going to take half of them. So I'm going to pick them up from my layout so I know where they're going to go back to, every other one, and I'm going to press the seam allowances in the opposite direction gently. Don't overwork it, just press them lightly the other direction because we want those opposing seams when we put this together. So 1, and I'm doing this from the back side, gently nudging it over, and then we can start to join our row. So there's 1, and some will say, well, you could have. Yes, I could have, but the speed of putting together a strip set and pressing all the seam allowances, where it's only 3 places where I'm going to change the direction, it seems that corrective pressing was the right approach at this point. So I've got 1, 2, and the third. So I'm just gently nudging that over. No one will know, and you will have much more fun in putting this together. There we go. Now, as we lay these pieces back in their spots, because we want them now to play nice with the pieces next to them, we are going to join together this row. But where do we start? The idea is to start pretty much in the center, for me anyway. I decided that working from the center out was the easiest, so that I keep laying things back in position so that I will make sure that I put them in the right order. Now you're going to have opposing seams when you go to join these together, and how sweet is that? Especially if you're using high contrast fabrics. High contrast means that you're really going to see the motion from one pyramid or triangle to the next. And if you have those opposing seams and they nest together nicely in the machine, then you're going to have something that looks like you just perfectly matched everything up. And that's kind of what we're shooting for, right? Okay, now that I have my opposing seams there, when I open this up, it should, and we can just decide what direction we want to press our seam allowances. At this point, it doesn't matter too much. We're just going to make sure we keep going in that same, I'm going to go clockwise because it's something that's, for me, a logical direction to go clockwise around. So I'm going to press my seam allowance open gently. Remember, we've got some bias edges there that are still exposed. So we need to be careful with those. And then we're going to join the next one. I know at this point, this isn't the hard part. The hard part is getting all of those to come together. And I have a little trick that I thought of one day when I was working on something similar to this. And I thought, well, why do I have to do the seam all at once from beginning to end? We're taught to start our seams, oops, my fabric. My machine likes to go from fabric to fabric, not off the edge. So my little cheat piece there. Some machines do not like jumping into fabric, into the air. And this one is one of them today. Even with my little spider, it didn't like it. Okay, we'll just start in a little bit here. fickle machines. Okay. There we go. Get this one put together. Oh, I can feel the opposing seams underneath there. So I have those coming together nicely again. Making sure I'm as gentle with those cut edges as possible. Okay. Now, once I get that open, I'm going to lay it out, and I'm going to, again, press in one direction. I'm going to keep going, even though I'm crisscrossing a seam underneath there. That's okay. We want one direction going all the way around. It'll help reduce the bulk when we put our pieces together. So I'm going to press this again. Drop my iron in there. And then we're going to go out and add our next triangles, which will complete 2 diamonds, and then add those last triangles to the outer edge. So a little bit of distortion because my machine didn't want to drop onto the fabric right away there, but you'll notice that those intersections out there, that's what I'm looking for. Those intersections as my strip set pieces are being put together. Okay, now go ahead and add your outside triangles, right sides together, stitch those, press outward, and then add your 2 triangles here and press outward. Now, joining these 2 together isn't as difficult. You're going to want to look at your intersections. You're going to want to pin match to make sure that you're getting across that intersection where you're joining these on. And let's do that real quick here. I can show you one here. If I do one more short seam, I know that these have more pieces to them than we're used to, but I think that by showing you the pin matching, that you will also have that success that you're looking for when putting those together. Because our background fabric is quite a contrast between our patchwork and that light. So we really want to have that. I'm just going to finger press that. But when we go to put, say, these 2 rows together, when we put these right sides together, our intersections are seams going in different directions. So what we want to do is take a pin and go down from the cut edge 1/4 inch, put the tip of the pin through. Now find the intersection of your 3 seams that are coming together there and drop the tip of the pin into that, and that will hold. Now I've got kind of a north pole going down through those pieces. Now I'm going to pin on either side of that so it doesn't get out of alignment as I stitch. And then I can take the north pole out and I can stitch through this section. Now, this is only where there's a couple of seams coming together, but what about where there's a lot of seams coming together? Well, because you did your pressing in one direction, remember I said I was going clockwise around the wheel. If these are going this direction, these pieces are going to go this. When you join them together, there'll be opposing seams. And you can do the same exact thing. Take the center, drop your pin through the intersection. You're going to want to be a 1/4 inch down from the cut edge, and you're going to double check the front to make sure that you're right on the point of your center, and then go into the other side, matching those up. Now, when you go to put this together, most of us think, well, I'm going to stitch one long seam through the middle, but a little bit of distortion can happen. And even though we've pin matched and really worked hard to get it good, it might slide. So who says you can't start at the center? So my trick for getting those centers to look really nice is to start at the center. Work your way out, break thread, go back, work from the center, out. That way you know that there's no distortion, nothing's going to slide. You've already nailed down your intersection at the very beginning of your seam. So a joining seam of these 2, of row 2 and 3, does not need to be one long seam. You can start in the center and work your way out. And that will give you the center that you really are looking for, that perfect intersection. Linda says hello from Buffalo, Kentucky. Let's see. I've got Lee saying good morning from England. I've got, let's see, who else over here? We've got Carol Ann coming in from Alaska. Yay. Louisiana, or no, Lori says hello from Tennessee. And we've got a good morning from Pennsylvania. We've got people watching from all over. Wonderful. Diamond Sparkle. Once you get the rows put together and you have everything joined, then it's to layer and quilt your project. So remember, again, you have a few bias edges on the outside edge. Just be very gentle with it. Should be able to assemble without too much problem using those little tips and tricks, opposing seams, pin matching your centers so that you get those joins nice and neat and defined between the fabrics. And I want to look just briefly here at the quilting process. So when I went to work on something like this, I was kind of thinking, oh, I'll do diamonds. I want diamonds in the outer points. But when you run lines through a star like this, you end up with triangles in the very center. So straight lines is what I did. I did in the ditch all the way around the outside first. I didn't want anything losing that nice crisp line out there. And then I chalk lined my straight lines from corner to corner all the way through. But then I got to the point where, what am I going to do on the outside edges? Since I'm kind of in the doing straight lines, I kind of kept with that. I know a lot of times when we have straight lines within a project, we suggest doing curves. But I was afraid that curves might cause me some distortion on my outer edge. So I stuck with the straight lines. And I did an outline and then did a wider line and then a narrower line. So as I put this up, I think you can see, there we go. And I ran my lines all the way to the outer edge and then crisscrossed them out here. So there's kind of a diamond pattern in the outer points of each of the triangles, or diamonds and triangles. Because we're using a very tonal fabric that reads as one, the areas that have two triangles that come together, you don't even notice that actually it's made up of two triangles to do those diamonds. That allows you to do the nice rows of putting the project together, so you don't have to do any set-in seams. Let's see if there's any other things I wanted to talk about. Oh, the last thing I wanted to point out is when you're applying binding on the outer edge of your project, you'll probably want to kind of double check yourself as you go past each of the points to make sure you didn't kind of lop off the point. Now, there are times when we fudge as quilters. It's always best to leave the point if possible, even if your seam allowance isn't exactly 1/4 inch. So by leaving that point, it visually looks perfect. If it's off by a little tiny bit, okay. But it's better to leave a little extra fabric than to lop off the point. So you can see my point has just a little bit of white fabric at the top of it there, but the illusion is that it's pretty close on each of the points. And if you haven't done the hexagon binding before, we have videos for that so that you can learn how to bind the outer edge of a hexagon with perfectly nice aligned miters on the outside of your project. We are so glad that so many people joined us today. Peggy is watching from Connecticut, a first-time watcher. Terry from Wisconsin. Louisa, first-timer, loves the star pattern. You know, it's always one of those things to jump in, try something new, use the tips that we talked about, make sure your pressing and cutting is accurate. Best press and spray starch can be your best friend if you're new to working with bias edges. Use the color combination that speaks to you. Maybe you want something that's all spring colors that looks like kind of a flower bursting forth. Maybe you want to use something that is fall colors for this fall. But put together some strip sets, learn how to cut a few triangles, and learn how to use your ruler to cut diamonds, and you can make diamond sparkle in your own version. Thanks for joining me today.